y'all. Welcome to Killer Queens, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Tyrella, and like most millennials, I've always had an obsession with true crime. On KQ, you'll find light true crime stories, millennial hypes and gripes, some adult language, and maybe a special guest here and there. Just like a 90s sleepover, we're just a couple BFFs hanging out. So gather round and let's launch right into it. This episode contains discussion of domestic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Early in the morning of Halloween 2020, a driver called 911 after finding 19-year-old Livye Lewis unresponsive in the driver's seat of her vehicle on the side of a rural road in Hemp Hill, Texas. The high school valedictorian was dead from a single gunshot wound to the neck. Her loved ones immediately knew who'd killed her, her ex-boyfriend Matthew Edgar. But Matthew claimed to remember nothing about the night, let alone having murdered his ex-girlfriend who he claimed to love. Was he lying? Or was someone else responsible for Livvy's death? All right. I want to give a hey girl thanks to Madison for writing this one up. Thank you so much. And thanks to Kelsey Willis for requesting this case. Thank you. Livye Heather Lewis was born on October 4th, 2001 to her mother, Darcy Bass, and father, Jeremy Lewis, in Shreveport, Louisiana. Her obituary says that she came into the world the very same way that she lived, bringing joy to everyone's life. Darcy and Jeremy had another daughter after Livy named Braylee, and the two girls became the center of Darcy's world. Ultimately, Darcy and Jeremy ended up separating, and Darcy moved herself and the girls to the small town of Hemp Hill, Texas. In Hemp Hill, Darcy met Tim Vines, and the two had two sons together, Asen and Weston. Livy's obituary reads, "To know her was to love her. Livy was a beautiful ray of sunshine that shone through her eyes. She could absolutely light up any room that she walked into with just her smile. She was always making someone laugh and had a laugh you would never forget." Those who knew Livy described her as a goofy, fun, passionate young woman. Everyone had different stories to tell about time spent with her, but her friends and family agree on one thing, that her purpose in life was to help others. And she spent much of her time caring for others. She even got her CNA certification as soon as she was old enough. And she was super young. She was 19 when she passed away. I mean, my gosh. Livy worked as a CNA for 2 years at a local nursing home, and all of the residents there absolutely loved her. Livy was a straight A student in high school and had received a scholarship to a local college, and she had her sights set on earning a nursing degree and then becoming a physician's assistant. One of her best friends that she'd known since kindergarten, Bailey, said that Livy was always the kind of person who was ready to grow up and accomplish her goals. She said that when they were little, she didn't play like little kid games. She wanted to be a grown-up, and she was ready to have bills and stuff. I feel like that's kind of how I was. Like when I was little, I always wanted to play running errands. Literally, why would I do that? Why is that what I wanted? Because now I avoid running errands like the plague. And when I was little, I was like, oh, I have to stop at the dry cleaners. Oh, I have to stop and pick up the kids from school. Oh, I have to stop at the grocery store. Oh, I have to go to the bank and deposit a check, which I guess it's not really a thing anymore anyway, but it was then. And that's what I played, running errands. But Livy was she was just so responsible. And that even came through in her play as a child, which is just kind of funny. The way that Bailey talked about it was funny to hear. While working at the nursing home, Livy met fellow CNA Taylor, and the two quickly became best friends. And Taylor was about 6 years older than Livy, but they were still super close. They were pretty much inseparable. If you saw one of them, you were going to see the other one, kind of thing. In Livy's obituary, it's written, quote, "She walked effortlessly through life with such confidence, grace, and determination. Livy made such a huge impact in her short life here on earth, but she absolutely made the most of it. Livy enjoyed spending time with her family and friends, enjoying the simple things in life. She was able to achieve many accomplishments academically and overcome every obstacle that life threw her way. Livy loved life and lived it to the fullest with no regrets or inhibitions. She was independent and fearless, but kind. Livy was driven to do the best and to be the best for not only herself, but for the people she loved and wanted to make proud." Now let's talk about her murder. In the early morning hours of October 31st, 2020, around 5:15 in the morning, Sabine County. I don't know. It's Texas. It could be however country you can make that. That's what it is. The 911 dispatch received a call from a concerned passerby. A young woman was calling from the side of a remote road in Hemphill. She'd seen two vehicles pulled over into the grass and had stopped to see if they needed help. And inside of the sedan, she found a young woman slumped over the steering wheel, and the driver's door was open when she found this car. The passerby assumed the woman was drunk and had fallen asleep in her car, maybe. So she shook her and tried to wake her up, but she realized that this woman was not asleep. She was dead. First responders arrived at the scene quickly and found 19-year-old Livye Lewis dead in the driver's seat of her vehicle from an apparent gunshot wound to the neck. Unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done for her, and she was pronounced deceased on scene. Behind her vehicle was a black pickup truck, and laying on the ground between the two vehicles, in the fetal position, was 26-year-old Matthew Edgar. Matthew was covered in blood and confused and was transported to the hospital. As investigators began to arrive on scene, they found several other items on the ground between the two vehicles. They found a hat, a pair of cowboy boots, and a rifle. And the rifle was later confirmed to be the murder weapon. Just after 7:30 a.m., Darcy, Livvy's mother, arrived on scene, frantic, saying that she'd gotten a call from a friend saying that her daughter had been in an accident. And Darcy kept asking officers, like, let me see my daughter. Where is she? Why can't I see her? She was getting louder and louder. She was yelling at them. I did think it was kind of weird that they didn't really tell her what was going on. Like, she's at the scene. Livy's car is there. There's another vehicle behind it, but she can clearly see Livy's car. I do think that the officer finally said, yeah, she's in the car behind me. So clearly, if Livy's in the car behind him and nobody's moving and nothing's happening, then she's passed away. But it's like they're all just standing there looking at her, and she's like, where is my daughter? Somebody tell me, where is my daughter? Why can't I see my daughter? Can I please see my daughter? Like, they don't say anything to her. And then finally, somebody says, yeah, she's in the driver's seat of that car behind me. And so Darcy was like, I didn't want to believe that that was true, because if she was in the car behind him, obviously she was gone. Like, but she had to put two and two together. They weren't like, hey, we're sorry, ma'am, your daughter has passed away. We'll meet you at the station, or we'll drive you to the station. Like, none of that. It was, I'm just not sure why they were doing that. Darcy said she just felt like none of them wanted to be the one to tell her what was going on, but like, grow a pair. It's got to be difficult, but somebody has to do it. Like, she was losing her mind. It was really, really hard to watch. As investigators began to process the crime scene, I'm just going to say Sabine County. I don't know why that's what I want to do, but that's how my brain sees this. Sabine County Sheriff's investigator, J.P. McDonough, responded to the hospital to interview the only other person who was on the scene and who survived, which is Matthew Edgar. So Matthew was like, huh? I don't know. I don't know why I was there. I don't know what happened. And they were like, okay, well, you were found laying on the side of the road, my dude, and the car in front of you contained a woman who was deceased. He's like, what's the dead girl's name? Do you know who she is? He's like, yeah, we know who she, like, what the fuck? So the hospital looks at Matthew and they're like, he doesn't have any injuries, so he's not hurt. But he is absolutely covered in blood. So McDonough is like, where's all the blood coming from, dude? Like, you're not hurt. What's going on? And so Matthew's like, well, who's the dead girl? What's her name? Do you know her name? And so finally McDonough is like, yeah, her name's Lyvie. And he starts crying, which, you can say is genuine or not. We'll never know. McDonough said it looked like forced crying. He didn't actually see tears. I don't feel one way or another about that at all. Matthew said that he'd seen Lyvie the night before that at a party, but he'd not seen her since and had no idea what happened to her. Furthermore, he could not tell you why in the actual hell he was at the scene where she was dead and he's laying next to a damn shotgun or rifle. Excuse me. He don't remember none of that. It did not take detectives long to dig into Livvy's history with Matthew, and what they found was extremely concerning. Livy was a senior in high school when she first met Matthew, who was 23 years old at the time. Pardon me while I vomit. Taylor, Livy's best friend, had known Matthew for a while and was dating one of his friends, so they all started hanging out. However, Matthew was actually married to a girl named Montana, and they had 2 children together. Based on text messages, detectives determined that Livy and Matthew had started texting one another in November of 2019. He sent her a text and he was like, "You can't tell anyone, all caps, about us texting because I'm married." And she's like, "Duh. Obviously, I'm not going to run around telling everybody I'm texting a married dude or whatever." They end up having a fling of sorts, I guess. It was not very long. It was very short-lived. And then she firmly ended things with him. She said, "Look, I have no intention of being a homewrecker. I'm not interested in any of this. I'm done." I have to wonder, did he tell her they were separated? He was leaving his wife, some bullshit like that. That's what they always say. And when she found out that wasn't the case, she was like, "Well, I'm not doing this." I don't know. But whatever it was, she decided, "I'm absolutely not dealing with this." And so she broke it off with him. This did not stop Matthew from texting Livy, though. About 4 months later, he texted her telling her how unhappy he was in his marriage and that he had cheated on his wife again. Whoopsie. Gosh, I just keep cheating. Livy was like, "Okay, and I'm still not interested. You're married, so I'm not interested. I need for you to move along." So about 2 months later, Matthew ended his marriage to Montana through text message. He texted his wife saying, and I quote, "Ain't you, it's me," followed by a quote, "Me always cheating on you." Fantastic. Somebody stitched that on a pillow, okay? He literally, like, obviously he didn't divorce his wife through text. There's a process to that. But he ended it with her through text. "I just can't stop cheating. I think we need to break up. Are you fucking kidding me?" 4 days later, Matthew hired a divorce attorney and moved out of the home that he shared with Montana and their 2 boys. And Matthew and Livy started dating again shortly after that. They eventually moved in together and started living with her friend Taylor. As Matthew and Montana navigated a divorce and shared guardianship with their children, it was clear that Montana had a very strong disdain for Livy, which understandably so, until, though, all of a sudden she didn't. And then, like, out of nowhere, Montana was like, "Hey girl, let's like hang out. Like, let's be friends." Which, if this is the person who's living with your ex-husband and who is having essentially shared custody of your children, I'm sure it does behoove you to be friendly with that person. If that's the person that's going to be, partially raising your children, then yeah. But Montana wasn't just like, "Okay, let's be friendly. Let me get to know you a little bit so I know who it is that's taking care of my kids." She was like hanging out with Livy all the time, texting her all the time, talking to her all the time. It was kind of weird. And Darcy was like, "Look, you need to be careful. She might just be getting close to you with bad intentions, obviously, because she was married to Matthew. He cheated on her with you. And now you're together. Like, this is a love triangle, okay?" Darcy's concerns for her daughter were not misguided. Matthew had been growing more and more controlling and more abusive. Taylor said he'd get drunk and he'd just scream at Livy, and it got to the point where she didn't want him living at her house anymore. Matthew would send Livy text messages telling her how much he loved her, and she'd respond by asking him via text, "Why are you putting your hands on me like that? I cannot live with you drinking and treating me the way that you do. I can't live with you getting drunk and putting your hands on me like you do." This is clearly a situation that's escalating and it's consistent. It's happening often. He wasn't just emotionally abusive to her, he was also physically abusive. And the receipts are there. Like, she said, "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you putting your hands on me?" Livy had plans to move on to her college campus, but then in the summer of 2020, she made the decision to move in with Matthew and help care for him and his 2 sons. She even redecorated the boys' rooms, showing so much love and care for Matthew's sons. Late that summer in August, multiple texts were found from Livy to Matthew, her telling him that she was scared of him. She couldn't deal with him when he was drinking. And there were lots of, I would say, stronger than just, implications that he may have been physically assaulting her, especially when he was drunk. It's pretty clear that that's what they're talking about. Livy tried to keep this information from her friends and family. She didn't want anyone to worry about her, but she did send a photo to her cousin. And it was a selfie, and it showed Livy with a busted nose that she attributed to Matthew. So not only was he abusing her, but there was also text evidence to show that Matthew was cheating on Livy with guess who? Montana, his ex-wife. Matthew texted Montana and assured her that he was only cheating on Livy with her. Nobody else. Class act, man. He could cheat. He could be cheating with a bunch of women, but he's not your special girl. He's only cheating with you. Knowing that things were not going to get any better, Livy broke up with Matthew. Unfortunately, in a town as small as Hemphill, it's difficult to hide from someone, so Livy couldn't get completely away from him. And they all run in the same circles. All of them know each other. It's a whole thing, right? It's like this town is as small as your mama's Jack Russell. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's at everybody's house. Everybody's in everybody's business. I mean, it's really tiny. On the night of October 30th, 2020, just a few hours before Livy was found dead, she attended a pre-Halloween party at the house of a friend, Bobby Ozan. Also at the party were Matthew and Montana and their children. I'm a little confused about that because this seemed like a party, not like a cookout kind of situation, but okay. Bobby said Livy was having fun. Her and Montana were having a good time, and they were kind of ignoring Matthew. Like, it was like Livy and Montana were hanging out. They're talking. They're having a good time. Matthew's trying to come over and hang out with them, and they're sort of like, no, thank you. I'm not into this. So this pissed Matthew off. Bobby said Matthew was acting strangely anyway. He wasn't acting like himself. He was off. He was drinking really heavily. The more he drank, the angrier he got. And it seemed like he was ready to explode. So Matthew told the detectives that he left the party to go back to his house, and that's all he remembered. And they were like, were you drinking? He's like, yeah, I had a bottle of Jim Beam that night. He had a bottle of Jim Beam at the party, supposedly. And they said, well, did you have anything else to drink? He said, maybe a few beers earlier in the day. He also said that he'd seen Livy and Montana at the party, but he characterized his relationship with both of them as great. And detectives felt that they already had enough evidence to arrest Matthew and charge him with homicide. They made a big deal that he had no reaction to hearing that he was charged with homicide. Again, I don't put any weight into that. Everybody is different as to how they react to news that may or may not be shocking. So, the detective is like, well, obviously he knew it was coming because he knew he did it. He wasn't even surprised. He wasn't like, for what? Why would you do that? I wasn't even that. I couldn't have done this. They're upset that he's not protesting his innocence. But, if he had protested his innocence, they would have been like, he's acting. It's too much. Who's he trying to convince here? And I big fat think he did it, by the way. But it's, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I don't care about that. The evidence I have against him, though, pretty fucking damning. So we'll get into that. At the hospital, samples were taken from the blood on Matthew's face. And again, his face is covered in blood. It's crazy. But they take samples of that blood from his face, and all of his clothing from that night was confiscated for testing. Now that they'd arrested him, the district attorney by law had 90 days to present enough evidence to a grand jury to indict him, or else they were going to have to release him on bond. The local police brought in the Texas Rangers to help them investigate and build a rock-solid case. Though they felt certain that Matthew had murdered Livy, there were others who said there's no way Matthew could have done it. His friend, who was formerly in law enforcement, said, look, Matthew's a hard worker. He loves his family. He values his friendships, by God. And Madison says, well, shit, he must be innocent then. Let me tell you something. First of all, you and I are absolutely capable of murder. There is no human that is not capable of it. However, I feel pretty confident I'm not going to do that. But, and I'm sure you're not either, but everybody's capable of it. But this big, well, I know him and I'm friends with him and he wouldn't do it. Sir, have you ever been in a sexual relationship with him? No. Have you ever been in a romantic relationship with him? No. Then I bet he treats you a hell of a lot better than he treats the women in his life who he physically assaults on a regular basis. This is the kind of man who cannot handle being not the center of attention, not the end all be all. He's got to be in control, all those things. And what happened that night? Livye in Montana blew him off, and that was the last fucking straw for him. So no, you don't think he could do it because you've never seen that side of him. Well, of course you haven't. You are not the person who brings out that side in him. Okay? For him, for Matthew, and for anybody who is a perpetrator of intimate partner violence, you're not the one in danger, are you? Now, in my situation, it was mostly saved for me when we were essentially behind closed doors. Every once in a while, though, and as time went on, he had a harder time. This is my high school boyfriend, had a harder time not letting that mask slip, right? And so every once in a while, other people would see his outbursts because he couldn't keep them hidden all the time. I'm certain other people, well, we know Taylor saw it. She lived with him because he can't keep that under control all the time. But this man was a man who employed him. So yeah, you're probably going to think that he's doing okay. Well, he's a family man. Aren't they all? I'll tell you another thing. I had a boyfriend a long time ago, obviously, because I've been married a long time now. But I dated this guy, early aughts, 2007, maybe, something like that. And I met him in college. That college where I fell down is where I met him. We had a class together. Anyway, we started dating. He's like a super cute, like very cute dude. One of those guys that like all my friends and like Tori felt like giddy around him, when he would come around with all of us, like we'd all go to dinner or whatever. And they'd be like, like if he talked to you, you were just like, you just got flustered. Like he was like that kind of guy or whatever. Super nice guy, super gentleman. I never felt unsafe around him. I never felt uncomfortable around him. I never felt pressured by him in any way, shape, or form. He was nothing but an absolute gentleman to me. I knew his family. I worked with his mom for quite a while. Like, gentleman. Okay. He went on to be convicted of rape. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I first heard that somebody had accused him of that, I did not believe it because I knew him, right? And that's not the person that I know. That's not the person that I had any type of relationship with. And for me, I even took it that step further. Like this guy is a friend and an employer or whatever. But for me, there was that step further because I was like, well, I was in a romantic relationship with this guy and he wouldn't do that, right? He's a gentleman. But when I got a hold of the court documents, which are public record, there is no doubt. And he spent, I think, 8 years in prison for it. And the evidence was significant and you can't dispute it. It was violent. Now, alcohol was involved and I believe exacerbated it. And as far as I know, he is completely sober now. But you just don't know. So to say, well, I know he loves his family. He values his friendship. Okay. And, again, baby, who told you evil was ugly? This facade of, well, he seems like a nice enough guy. Okay. Two things can be true. He can love his family. He can value his friendships. And he can be an abuser to his significant other. He is. Because guess what? You can value your friendships, you can love your family, and you can have zero coping mechanisms in your life to regulate your own emotions as a grown adult. All those things can happen all at the same exact time. Matthew's mother, Cindy, implied during several recorded jail phone calls that Montana could have been behind the murder. More of a throwing under the bus type of a situation, I think, but that's what, she's trying to get at here. So investigators looked into the possibility of Montana's involvement. Her relationship with Livy, remember, was super weird because Livy is, I'm not going to say the woman that your husband was cheating on you with, because those, I believe, are many. Matthew is an equal opportunity cheater. And, we do love a non-discriminatory type activity, unless it's like cheating on your wife. But, all that to say, Livy wasn't the only one, but then he ends up with her after. So it is weird that they became so close. And then also Matthew was cheating with Montana on Livy. It's, what a mess. But it is weird, right? They ultimately determined, though, that Montana had no involvement in the crime whatsoever or a cover-up of it. She had absolutely nothing to do with it. She did, however, have some interesting information and text messages from that night that eventually became the nail in Matthew's coffin. Montana told detectives that Matthew had left the party that night, but then he came back and he overheard that Livy was that Livy was planning on staying that night with Bobby. Bobby, the guy who owned the house. I need more information. Livy was 19. Bobby looks, now I could be wrong, much, much, much older than that. I could be wrong. He looks significantly older than Livy. Just saying. All right. So he was pissed that Livy was going to spend the night with Bobby. And in the 48 Hours episode, the host asks her friend who she's talking to, or who is telling him this, to confirm. And by staying over with Bobby, you mean sleeping with Bobby. And she's like, right. And so this enrages Matthew. He starts kicking the doors of Livy's car. He left huge dents in the sides. And then he grabbed Montana around the neck. She was able to get Bobby to come outside and deal with it. And Bobby said, I ended up having to pin Matthew down so the girls could leave in their separate cars so they could drive away. Both Bobby and Montana said that Matthew was screaming that he was going to kill all of them. All of them. Montana wanted to get somewhere safe, so she drove to Matthew's mother and grandparents' house. Based on the rest of the story, I'm not sure that that's the safest place for you, but okay. And I'm not blaming Montana. His mom, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could fucking throw her, okay? So that's where she went. Matthew followed her there and attacked her in the driveway. She says he choked her again while their two kids were in the back seat of his van. I'm sorry. Now, I do have feelings about you leaving your young children at the party where your ex-husband still is, and I guess you assume he's going to drive your children somewhere. I get that she had to get out of there because it was dangerous. He's hammered as fuck. He told the police he had an entire bottle of liquor at this party, in addition to all the other beers he had during the day. He drove those children. Look, I'm from the country, but I don't know that I can rock with Hemp Hill, Texas. This is not, and we're just all okay with this. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, that's just what was happening. Montana said she kept honking the horn, hoping somebody would come out of the house and help her. But that never happened. And finally, Matthew let go. So Montana went inside and asked if she could stay the night. Matthew went inside, Matthew went into his house, which was on the same property, just like another house on the property, not too far away. Then Montana and Matthew immediately start texting. I am assuming, I am hoping that when Montana went inside the house, she took those damn kids inside with her. Surely to God, she did not let Matthew take them to his house on the property. I have concerns for these children, okay? I really do. Anyway, They're both now, she's in the one house, he's in the other. Who knows where these kids are? And they're texting now. And he said, quote, "You took part in it and you were as guilty as she is," accusing Montana of being part of the decision that Livy made to spend the night with Bobby. Then he said, quote, "I will take your life, her life, and his life. Mark my words." At 3:22 in the morning, Matthew texted Montana that he was leaving. Oh, I knew this. Oh my God. I think I've blocked it out because of how angry he said. Oh my God. At 3:22 a.m., Matthew texted Montana that he was leaving and she better come get her kids. Okay. I'm going to have to do some research and see if there's some Child Protective Services information on these children, because what the fuck? He choked you in the driveway. He choked you at the house. He drove your kids home drunker than fucking Cooter Brown. He's attacking you. He's threatening to kill you. Now, I don't have every single text message they have that night. They exchanged that night. The only ones we have are the ones related to this case, I guess specifically. Was she texting him and saying, "Where are the kids? Are they okay? I want to come get them. Let me have them tonight." And he just wasn't letting her? I'm very concerned. Anyway, 12 minutes later, he texted her saying, "I'm home. I got Livy's keys and her phone." And Montana said, "Well, where is Livy?" And he responded, "Dead." She asked him if she could come down there to his house, but Cindy wouldn't let her leave, so she fell asleep. She says, "I didn't call 911 because I didn't think Matthew was serious. He just, spouts off or whatever. And so when he said that she was dead, I didn't believe him." Now, I don't know. It seems to me that if you didn't think he was serious, and I don't know, maybe she didn't care. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like she was texting and calling Livy trying to get in touch with her either, like to make sure she was okay. That doesn't make any sense. And Livy's family feels the same way. They're like, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand this. Montana was married to him. They were like, she knew his temper. She knew what he was like. She knew that he was dangerous. She should have called 911. Montana said she didn't know that anything had happened until she woke up early the next morning. So not long after Matthew had sent that text to Montana saying that Livy was dead, he went back to Livy's car, but this time in his cousin Zach's truck. This was the truck that was ultimately found parked behind Livy's car when the police showed up and found everybody. Nobody could understand why Matthew would go back to the scene. Others speculated that maybe Montana or even Matthew's mother, Cindy, had been to the crime scene that morning to help him cover up what he'd done. However, after an in-depth multi-agency investigation, they determined that all the evidence led to only one person, and that was Matthew Edgar. In February of 2021, the court shut down due to the pandemic, so no grand juries were being convened, and by law, the judge was forced to release Matthew on a bond of $50,000 because he had not been indicted at that point. Livy's friends and family could not believe the bond had been set so low, and now he's just back out in the community. On March 16th of 2021, a grand jury was held and heard the evidence against Matthew. They made the recommendation that he be indicted for Livy's murder. Despite this indictment, Matthew stayed out of jail. He was still on bail. So in December of 2021, he still has not gone to trial. He's been indicted for murder damn near a year before this. And anyway, so in December of 2021, Darcy, Livy's mom, was shopping inside a local convenience store, and in walks Matthew. And when she saw him, she said something just snapped, and she went after him. She said she screamed at him over and over, "You killed my daughter." Darcy chased him out of the store and grabbed a chain out of the bed of his truck, banging it across his windshield. Darcy, my girl. I don't know what I would do in this situation. Honestly, I'd probably do the same fucking thing. I mean, here now with my children being safe and unharmed, I could sit here and be like, that's not going to help anything. And that doesn't, don't do that kind of stuff. But no, if the man that murdered my child was still indicted, had not yet gone to trial, and was just out on the street because he got a low bail on a technicality because of fucking COVID and like all that. Nah, I'd probably fucking do the same shit. I don't blame her at all. I mean, you can't blame her. He murdered her daughter. Could we all sit here and say we do something different? Sure, but unless you're in the position, nah, girl, fuck his car up. I don't give a shit. Now, I'm not condoning that because she was arrested. Okay, it is still illegal. But Matthew filed a complaint with the police. Okay. Again, I don't condone it. I don't because okay, what if he's wrongfully accused of whatever. All those things can be true. It's not the right thing to do necessarily. But if you're Matthew, even if you, for whatever reason, here's the other thing. Let's talk about Matthew's defense and the fact that he said he was going to kill her. He texted people that he was going to kill her. He tried to attack her that night. He texted Montana that he did kill her, that she was dead. Livvy's phone and keys ended up with Matthew. He was laying behind her vehicle that she was sitting deceased in on the side of the road. The gun that she was killed with is his gun, which happened to be at the scene directly next to his body. Not body, but you know what I mean? Next to him laying there. So his defense is, yeah, all that looks bad, but I didn't do it. You compound that with the fact that he was also physically and emotionally abusive, not only to Livy, but also to Montana and probably everybody he'd ever been with. But he was also physically abusive. So you want us to believe, sir, you want us to believe that all of those things happened, but somebody else happened to kill her. Yes, he did this. Yes, he did that. Yes, he said this. Yes, he said that. Yes, there's a record of that. Yes, there's a record of this. And it looks real bad, but somebody else did it. Okay. And then on top of that, you're going to file a report against Livy's mother for fucking your truck up. You gotta be some kind of asshole to pull some fucking shit like that. Whether or not he killed her, but he did. So especially since he killed her, you really filed a report against her. Okay. So anyway, Darcy was arrested and charged with assault caused by bodily injury, retaliation, and criminal mischief. Fortunately, all of those charges against her were dropped. Does not change the absolute fuckery that is Matthew Edgar. In January of 2021, as Matthew's trial date approached, Darcy felt confident that the evidence would prove that he was guilty. She felt that Matthew's threats, him being found on the crime scene, the murder weapon was his, all of those were extremely convincing evidence. And remember, Livy's cell phone was found in the truck parked at the scene, and her keys were located in the driveway at Matthew's mother and grandparents' house. According to investigators, Cindy was reluctant to turn the keys over, wanting to protect her son. Of course. All right, now listen. You listen here. I have 2 boys. I would do anything in the world for them. I love them so much. Cindy, now look, the individual actions of her son are not her fault, right? He is his own person. He has his own autonomy, all of those things. The way that she handles this case tells me that she created an entitled ass little bitch who thinks he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and has absolutely no respect for women. I don't know anything about his father. I'm not just blaming the mother, but I only know about her, and she takes very specific actions in this case that absolutely support that. This is not how we raise people. We don't raise people to just get and do whatever they want just because you think the sun shines out of their ass or whatever. Like, yeah, he's your child, and I think my children are perfect, but they also have to learn lessons, and they also need to be good people. And I don't see that Matthew had any incentive for that. And he certainly has never faced accountability. I will tell you that right now. So, she didn't want to turn the keys over. She wanted to do whatever she could to help Matthew. And she even suggested that Livy was killed by the drug cartel. because Matthew owed them money. They say to the tune of $30,000. And I am really sorry, but it does not sound like, yeah, Matthew worked some. I don't know that he had $30,000 over the course. He was still fairly young. He was in his 20s. I don't know that he'd made $30,000 by that point. I just, like, what? Are you serious? And the detectives laughed. And they said, Cindy was like, yeah, and then the cartel staged the whole scene to make it look like Matthew was at fault. But he didn't do it. They just made it look that he's been framed by the fucking cartel. Like, come on. On Monday, January 24th, 2022, the trial against Matthew began with jury selection while he was still out on bond. The state began presenting their case. They explained that a small spot of blood on Matthew's pants from that night belonged to Livy, to which the defense argued that could have been from another time. She could have got a bloody nose, or she could, he couldn't, whatever. And that is true. There is no time stamp on when blood was left. However, the fact that he does have some of her blood on his clothing and she's been shot is compelling. And he was at the scene. It's not even like he was out of town or something and they're saying, well, her blood is on you. Like, he was fucking there, So that's a problem for his case. However, remember, Matthew was found with blood all over him. Like, he had blood on his face and stuff. That blood didn't belong to him, and it didn't belong to Livy. And they never tested it to find out who it belonged to. And so the defense said, that's reasonable doubt. It's possible that that third person, that unidentified DNA, is the person who killed her. I mean, it is fucking possible. That is weird. I don't understand why they wouldn't have at least run that to see if they could get a match. If your case is solid, why this is not gonna, well, I don't want to say it's not gonna hurt it, because I mean it could. I mean, that if there was a match to it, I don't know, that could present a problem. However, I know typically when there's unidentified DNA, I mean, like in the Central Park 5 case, when there was that unidentified DNA, which happened to belong to the actual attacker, the prosecutors said, oh my God, what do they call that? I was obsessed with this for a while. I was going to do a whole episode on it. Now that I say that, I want to. So they actually call it the unindicted co-ejaculator. Because, this person came along and did the stuff and left behind the evidence, but it just looks like you're guilty. Like that's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit. It's just like, obviously it's not exactly the same, but it just kind of reminds me of that, where like the, Central Park 5 were arrested for the, rape and attack. And then they tested the DNA of, because there was semen left at the scene and it didn't match any of the 5. And so prosecutors said, don't worry about that, jury. The reason that is because none of them, even though they most certainly did rape her, none of them ejaculated. Somebody else ejaculated, maybe a consensual sexual experience that she had earlier in the day. That's that person's semen. But they did do this, make no mistake. And it worked. It's not going to work here. Sorry, Matthew. The biggest hurdles, though, for Matthew's defense were those text messages and the fact that he continued to say that he didn't remember anything after leaving the party. And you know what? I believe him. If he was that drunk, he might not remember everything after the party. It doesn't mean that he didn't do it. I don't think he blacked out the whole rest of the night, but I'm sure there are pockets of that he doesn't remember. And thank God his children made it home safely. Jeez. Despite this, Matthew was feeling super confident about his chances of winning this trial. And he'd even texted that friend, the one who was like, well, I mean, he loved his family. I don't think he could murder somebody. He'd texted him asking him, would he hire him because he's going to need a job when this trial's over. So the prosecution rested on, they kind of finished up their case at the end of the second day. So the morning of the third day, they rested their case and it is the defense's turn. And the defense knew that this was happening. The prosecution had let them know we're going to be done. That morning, right before the defense's case is supposed to start, Cindy calls Matthew's defense attorney and says, "Hey, I can't find Matthew. He took a gun and he left. I'm afraid he might kill himself." He was just gone. So apparently he had just waited for the battery on his ankle monitor to die, and then he just fled. Every agency in the surrounding area joined the search for the now fugitive. This just reinforced to Livie's friends and family their strong opinion that he should not have ever been out on bond. The trial continued, though, without Matthew. The jury was not informed that Matthew had fled, but they surely were wondering where the fuck did he go, because he's been here for every day of this trial and now he's just not here. I mean, I don't know. You might be able to be like, oh, well, maybe he was sick or something. You'd think they'd just pause it if he can't be there, but I mean, I don't know how it works. I know that you have the right to be part of your trial. So if you are sick, really sick one day, would they reschedule it? I don't know. But anyway, they went on, the show must go on. So his defense team rested their case, and after an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury came back with their verdict. He was guilty of murder. Still missing, Matthew was considered armed and very dangerous. The U.S. Marshals got involved and continued helping local law enforcement search for him. Darcy made homemade wanted posters with his picture and hung them all over town, and she felt confident that Matthew was still in the area. She had a feeling that he had been visiting the memorial that she'd made for Livie where she'd been found, and she'd heard rumors that his mom had been buying Matthew's favorite liquor and cigarettes and in large quantities. And she's like, where's she bringing those to? What's she doing with that? And Darcy was terrified that he'd never be found and brought to justice. And she told CBS News, quote, "That time was horrible. It was scary. And I thought he was just going to get away and nobody was looking. And I was having to make wanted posters and go hand them out at flea markets or little events they had around town, put them up in the store windows with people telling me to take it down." In late December of 2022, almost a year after Matthew became a fugitive, the U.S. Marshals received a tip that he might be hiding out in a house surrounded by woods just yards from his grandparents' property. Why the fuck they not checked that before? The Marshals had to have eyes on Matthew, though, before making any moves onto the property. So they enlisted the help of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The plan was for a small team to get as close as they possibly could to the residents at night and use night vision to spot Matthew. And I think their thinking was he's probably going to move around more at night because, he wouldn't be so visible and all that stuff. Deputies were parked on the opposite side near the driveway to the residence, but out of sight. The team went into the woods at about 4:30 p.m. and they waited for the sun to go down, and they could hear voices coming from the porch, but they couldn't see anyone. Shortly after that, a huge thunderstorm came through the area, and it was like raining cats and dogs. Fortunately, though, the noise from the storm covered any noise from their movements and allowed them to get closer. So they're about 30 yards from the house. They're still able to hear voices on the porch, but they still can't see anyone. And then a man steps off the back porch and walked around to the side of the house, and the team immediately recognizes this man as Matthew Edgar. So the deputies on the other side of the house closed in, they surrounded the house, they yell for everyone to exit with their hands up. They bring Matthew over to the squad car and he asks the detective, quote, "You haven't proven my innocence yet?" Oh my gosh. They were like, "No." And then he was like, "Please don't shoot my mother. She's inside the house." And then he's yelling for her to come out. Mother, come out. So Cindy comes out of the house and she's like, "I'm going to have to go to jail for something I don't even know nothing about." And they said when she walked out, she was like, "Matthew?" Trying to act like she had no idea he was there. She was not expecting to see him, all that. Come on. They were just first of all, you are no Meryl Streep. You're not going to win any awards for this performance. And we all know that you knew he was there the whole time. On January 3rd, 2023, Matthew was formally sentenced to 99 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. Darcy and Livie's best friends said they'll be there when Matthew comes up for parole, and they're going to do everything they can to ensure that he never gets out of prison. In November of 2023, Matthew's mother, Cindy, was charged with hindering apprehension or prosecution of a known felon. She's not yet been to trial, as far as I can tell. One of Livvy's best friends, Bailey, said she doesn't want Livy to be remembered as the girl who got murdered in a small town. She wants people to remember her for the way that she carried herself and the happy person that she was to be around. Ugh. So young, too. 19 years old, my gosh. But that is it. That is the case. Let me know what you think. And I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Bye. If you liked this episode, be sure to like this episode and follow the show so that you never miss out on new episodes. Get in on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Killer Queens Pod, or you can join our Facebook discussion group at Killer Queens Podcast, where we discuss cases covered on the show and all things 90s. If you want to submit a case to be covered on the show, visit killerqueenspodcast.com/case submission and just complete the form. And if we cover the case, we'll give you a shout out on the show. Lilas.